Hugh Hewitt. Michael Pillsbury is the American Director of the Center for Chinese Strategy at the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. He is the author, most recently, of The 100-Year Marathon, one of the most important books for everyone listening to understand the People's Republic of China, where it is and where it is going. In a matter of hours, he will be in the Oval when the president signs the new Chinese-American trade deal. Michael Pillsbury, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Hugh.
What do you make of this agreement?
Well, I think it's pretty good.
Well, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical because of you. You made me skeptical. It's the 100-year marathon. You made me don't believe a promise the Chinese make to you. Why are you confident in this agreement?
Well, you think I should recall all copies of my book?
You should.
Marathon and burn them?
No, but you've created Chinese skeptics like me. You've got to now persuade me that they're going to, here are the deals that they've agreed to buy, $200 billion worth of goods. We'll be able to follow that or not. But greater access to their markets, that they're going to punish Chinese firms that infringe or steal corporate secrets, that they're going to stop state-owned enterprises from stealing our technology, that they're going to, that they're going to be good actors. Why should we believe them?
Well, it's very simple. It's two words: enforcement mechanism.
Explain, please.
First of all, I noticed a lot of the press this morning is calling this a truce or a ceasefire in the trade war, but actually the president is leaving the tariffs on. He's not raising them any higher.
Correct.
But he's leaving on roughly 25%. At the tariff rate of 25% times $360 billion. So we're going to be taking in $60 billion plus in tariffs ourselves. U.S. government money, you might say, that's obtained from the Chinese, number one. Number two, we've explained all along to them that these tariffs are punishment for intellectual property theft and a number of other areas of misconduct in the trade field. They understand that. They don't like it. They're trying to play this whole thing down over in China, the number of concessions they've made, but there's built-in enforcement that the tariffs can be raised higher, number one. Number two, to reduce the tariffs that are in place now, they have to comply with a number of things in an 86-page agreement, which will be released today at noon during the signing ceremony. They're also, everything that they're promising to do, we can verify. President Trump has used a lot of the old Ronald Reagan technique of trust but verify. So there's a lot of carrots and sticks both built into this agreement. It's not just a pledge from the Chinese. And I agree with you, and I agree with the 100-year marathon, that the Chinese would prefer not to implement this and to continue cheating. But now there's going to be a system whereby if an American company feels its trade secrets have been stolen, they can report it in a process. There'll be investigations, and the Chinese are agreeing that if it's true, they'll either fix it or they'll pay the penalty for what they're caught doing. This is historic. This is why this agreement is so important. No other country has ever persuaded China to sign this kind of enforcement mechanism agreement. That's what the good news today is.
Now, talk to me, Michael Pillsbury. You detailed in the 100-year marathon that the Chinese are very good and very committed to intellectual espionage. Of course, we expect superpower to superpower competition in the dark arts, right? That's just a given, and it's been around since the Great Game, and it will continue forever.
To surpass us. The key thing here is they're coming close to surpassing us. And the president now has said 9 or 10 times that China is not going to surpass us on his watch. He claims that if Hillary Clinton had been elected, we would now be seeing the Chinese GDP growth rate is 3 times faster than ours. So they would actually be the number one economic power in the world. In fact, a lot of people have been showing up in opinion polls already think China is the number one economic power in the world. So a lot of what's behind this trade agreement is to stop China stealing its way to the top in the world. It just steals so much that that's a major factor in their growth rate.
Of course it is. But now what I want to know is we have ways, at least when I was in the government and when you were in the government, we had ways of knowing who their bad actors were in the United States. If we know that their bad actors continue to do what we know that they do, which is to steal intellectual property whenever and wherever they can, does this trade agreement get revoked? In other words, if they don't withdraw their spies, do we withdraw from this agreement?
Well, if the spies are violating trade rules, the spies themselves get arrested. There's a couple of new programs I think you know about. One is the Department of Justice has something called the China Initiative. And the fact sheet for that shows a great increase in prosecutions for economic espionage and violations of trade law by anyone, either it's Americans or Chinese inside the United States. The second initiative is the FBI, which has announced that most of its economic espionage cases are China. And they're increasing the number of agents and the number of counter-espionage activities by the FBI. So these are very serious parts. They're not written into this trade agreement. That'd be kind of too insulting for our Chinese.
Well, I agree, but what I'm saying is I don't expect them to acknowledge it. I expect us to be able to see them withdrawing their agents of espionage. And you and I both know, we know who many of them are. We don't know who all of them are. We watch them. Is it a metric of success in your mind, Michael, that our espionage agencies tell us that they are retreating from the front lines of economic espionage?
That's not a metric in this agreement, and I don't expect that will happen. I think the Chinese are so addicted to technology theft that it's going to take a period of adjustment for them to realize they're going to be punished heavily when they're caught. So are increasing the number of FBI agents and other intelligence activities on our side. That's the only way to go forward. We've got to catch them in the act, Hugh. We can't just say, okay, withdraw all your spies. Withdrawing spies, as you know, would be awfully hard to verify, because I don't think we know all China's spies inside the United States.
Now, you've just articulated the conundrum for me. The Chinese are addicted to technology theft. And when you articulate that, I look at the agreement. I'll ask Peter Navarro, who's coming up after the break at the top of the hour, next hour. When we know that they have this addiction, we know that they can't stop. So why do we think an agreement will actually change their behavior? And this is, by the way, the behavior of the party, not the behavior of Chinese companies. That Chinese companies are often obliged to do this, right?
Well, and that's part of the danger. Fortune 500 just announced that China now has 129, 10 companies more than we do, and the top companies in the world. China has surpassed us in the size of these large companies, and they are the ones who do a lot of the spying and the technology coercion. They call them, Hugh, the national champions.
Yes.
Most 80 of them are state-owned enterprises, not really private companies. So slowing these companies down or catching them, and obviously Huawei has been the first example. Everyone knows Madame Meng is still under house arrest up in Vancouver. The request to extradite her is still underway. This is something all other Chinese companies are reading about, because Huawei was in that top 100 national champions. So here is part of President Trump's strategy to try to get them to reform these really outrageous trade practices.
In the 100-year marathon, you discussed the national champions approach that President Xi has embraced so strongly. Do you see anything in the agreement, which you obviously have access to and we don't see until noon, that will curb their lust for our technology? And by the way, do you see anything in the agreement that will stop Huawei from bidding to become the back door for technology theft all around the world?
Well, the whole thing is going to depend on this enforcement mechanism. There, as you point out, it's good for us to be skeptical that they'll abide by the agreement. So when the first cases begin to be filed, and it's sort of a month-to-month process, there's going to be a time limit that the adjudication can be 90 days or so. There'll be quick decisions, then there'll be the punishment to be meted out. Once this gets going, if the Chinese companies do in fact get punished, and the Chinese side accepts tariffs being put back on, being raised, or other kinds of punitive sanctions, there's not just tariffs. There are other ways to stop Chinese access, for example, to our capital markets. Then we'll see if this agreement actually works. What I'm impressed with is what President Trump has done. He took on the problem. He fought it out now for almost 2 years, and he discovered he was heavily criticized by Heritage Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce. Never put a tariff on. Tariffs are terrible and evil and so backward. But President Trump proved tariffs brought China to the table, and they agreed to this enforcement mechanism. So I would say, Hugh, within like 90 days or at most 6 months, we're going to see this all work. yes, the Chinese will still cheat, but we'll catch them and there'll be punishment. That's probably our only hope, to slow them down from this technology theft. It's otherwise going to drive them to be the number one power in the world, and we'll have to get used to being number two.
Now, talk to me. That is unacceptable. Talk to me about the enforcement mechanism, Michael Pillsbury, because you are a China skeptic, and so that you are confident in the enforcement agreement gives it great credibility. And so I'm curious, is it at the Department of Commerce? Do we have serious professionals involved? Are they committed to speed? Because this doesn't matter if they take the technology, iterate it 3 or 4 times, and give you back that which no longer matters. It's got to be fast.
Yes, it has to be fast. One sanction, obviously, is for Commerce Department, is putting Chinese companies on what we call the entity list, so no American firm can sell anything to them. This could cripple some Chinese companies. But the larger picture is the enforcement mechanism is supposed to be carried out by USTR, Ambassador Lighthizer team. They may have an office in Beijing to expedite the processing. There's an appeals system where you can, if I say, okay, Hugh, you stole $1 billion of my technology secrets. I want it compensated for, and I want you punished. And you say, no, Pillsbury, I did not do that at all. There's got to be presentation of evidence. Then there has to be a decision. So when we begin to see that happen, I think that's going to be the real credit to President Trump will begin to come in. People will say, my God, you've brought this technology-stealing giant under control.
Well, if he does
Trump's
that, he should win his second term with 49 states if it can be proven. Last question, Michael Pillsbury. Are you confident that we will be able to know if they've stopped?
Well, a lot of the burden is going to depend on the courage of American companies to bring cases against China that their technology is being stolen. And the company management is going to have to consider, look, we're dealing with a kind of mafia-like behavior. We'll get threatened. Somebody will say to us in China, you withdraw your complaint or else. The company's got to go forward and say, no, this is serious enough. For example, GM, Hugh, as you know, they sell far more cars in China than they do in America. So if pressure's put on, if GM files a case, something's been stolen, we want it back, we want punishment. China threatens GM, hey, you want to sell cars in our country? You withdraw this complaint. This is one of the weaknesses in the system. I think the president knows about this, and he's counting on American companies and also the American government to make complaints to make this enforcement mechanism work.
Well, we will watch and we'll have you back soon. Michael Pillsbury, you've turned me into a skeptic of this, and so I will listen to you closely. But, you got to live with the results of the 100-year marathon when you persuade people, Michael. You got to live with the results. Thank you for joining me. Come back early and often. Michael Pillsbury from the Hudson Institute, one of the go-to guys on China. Absolutely.